Bandwidth for changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. We move fast and fix things here at changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode Cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Rollbar. Move fast and fix things like we do here at changelog. Check them out at rollbar.com/changelog. Resolve your errors in minutes and deploy with confidence. Catch your errors in your software before your users do. And if you're not using Rollbar yet or you haven't tried it yet, they want to give you $100 to donate to open source via Open Collective. And all you got to do is go to rollbar.com/changelog, sign up, integrate Rollbar into your app, and once you do that, they'll give you $100 to donate to open source. Once again, rollbar.com/changelog. Hey everyone, Adam Stacoviak here, editor-in-chief of changelog. KBall just MC'd a live show at React Amsterdam with a panel of 5 amazing React experts for a great discussion of state management solutions and the future of state management in the front end. Enjoy.
Hello everybody, I'm Kevin, or KBall. I am a panelist on the JS Party podcast. Now, who here has ever heard of JS Party? One in the back, and one of the MC. Well, that's good. Y'all invited us.
That doesn't count.
Yeah, so JS Party is a podcast we publish weekly, focusing on all elements of the JavaScript ecosystem and things web. So obviously there's a lot of stuff talking about React. Just had a conversation that should publish today US time, so evening, with one of the folks from Gatsby, kind of covering a range of different JavaScript related topics. And we also come out to events like this. So we will do live shows at events. I'm interviewing a number of the speakers. Those are often published, things like that. So this will be a live show. Now the structure for today's event, we have all of our advice panel panelists. They have been answering people's questions. So I have a few pre-prepared questions, but I think broadly the opportunity here is to say, okay, what's actually bubbling up in the ecosystem? If you're answering questions, you're doing workshops, like what are people getting confused about? Where are the challenges? Maybe we can get some of that content out to you here in the audience and to the listeners who are going to listen to this in about a week from now. This will be published to the podcast. So throughout this, if you have questions, when we do a regular show, we broadcast it live and we have a Slack channel where people participate. Well, you are our Slack channel today. So if you have questions, raise your hand up. I will try to get those questions in, and then I will repeat them so that everybody can hear it and the panelists will answer. Now we do have only 2 handheld mics, so we are going to be passing around a little bit. So forgive us if there's a little bit there. But first off, then, let me introduce all of our panelists, and I'm going to try to make sure that I pronounce everybody's name right. So on this side, we're starting with Michel, who was the creator of, or author of MobX. Next, we have Mike Grabowski, the co-founder of CallStack.io and a member of the React Native core team.
Hello, everyone.
Vladimir, who is developer relations at Hasura and consultant and speaker.
Yeah, hi, everyone.
Next, Kitze. Did I pronounce it right? Kitze? I was having trouble with that earlier. Who is the founder of React Academy.
No, I'm just a vlogger.
And then Andrey, who is an independent web developer and designer.
Hi.
So I'm going to kick things off with one of my questions, because one of the great things about doing this is I get to get my questions answered. I've noticed a big pattern in the React world and the front-end world broadly is that we have increasing numbers of solutions related to state management. It seems like, we had the framework explosion, and now we have the state management explosion. And, answering questions in the advice lounge, we had experts here talking about MobX, which is focused on state management. Hooks were one of the big motivating factors declared about hooks was, we can use this to better manage our state. GraphQL, which is also essentially a state management solution. So I'm going to aim this question at Michel first, MobX. What are you seeing going on in the state management things? Like, are these solutions sort of evolving towards each other, or what's happening here?
I think the interesting thing in state management is still underway to be happening, and that's like the impact that suspense and concurrent mode will have. I hear people saying that like hooks and context and the recent APIs related to that did change the game. I don't think that's the case. They made the APIs much better, but they didn't fundamentally introduce new possibilities. And so sometimes people are like, oh, since there is now standardized context and standardized hooks, I don't need state management anymore. My simple answer is then you didn't need it before, because everything that you can do now with hooks and context, you could already do before. I mean, they made the API easier, they made composition easier, but they didn't, in essence, introduce new concepts. And I think in general, the state management game is still quite stable. Ryan Florence was tweeting earlier this week that there's basically 3 kinds of state. The state that is very specific to your domain, your persistent state, the things you send to the server, the things you want to keep if your office burns down. And there's just the state that lives in your component, either abstracted away or not. And I think that separation still will remain, and that separation will be more clear. Because there's now less reason to use state management solutions for local state. But I think that's the big separation: state that lives inside components and state that lives outside because it's generic for your application, or it's required in many different places in the same application. And for the latter, I still see GraphQL mostly as a transportation layer, which might be sufficient if the data matches very directly what you're receiving for the backend. And if there's any transformation in between, I still think that state management libraries are a great place to make that mapping between whatever you receive from backend and what you want to display, and usually what you want to enrich on the data.
So regarding GraphQL, I just can totally relate to that. That lots of people overuse. Well, GraphQL, you obviously can switch everything to use just GraphQL for your local state, and it's good. But some people overuse that, as you said, like having GraphQL as transportation layer and still keeping things in state management solution that you use will probably make it easier to adopt GraphQL in your ecosystem, because you're already using some kind of state management solution, and just adding GraphQL as a transportation layer, maybe using some local state for GraphQL and doing this connection with the state management that you use, it's something that is evolving right now. Like people use it more often. Yeah, so that's what I want.
I gave a talk, state management in the GraphQL era, maybe for 2 years. I'm just recycling the same talk, because I believe that GraphQL changed the game of state management. It's a bit ironic, because I was preaching that, hey, now with GraphQL, you don't even need a state management library on the client, right? And then eventually, when you have a complex client, like let's say you're building a calendar or something that has tons of interactions and stuff, then you see that like hooks and context and everything like that we have. I also get that question in workshops, like, can we replace Redux now with context and hooks? No, because Redux is using those technologies underneath in order to provide you with the Redux API. So you cannot replace Redux with hooks and context. When you have complex state, you still want to have something more advanced. For example, something that has observables. Not that Michel is here, but whenever I have like some more complex state management and I have a model that has like more than 600 lines of code, I'm still going to reach out to MobX or MobX State Tree to handle that code instead of handling it with hooks. So GraphQL is solving like 90% of the problems because it's solving the data problem. You don't have to think about it anymore. But then the last 10%, when you have like complex state management scenarios, you still have to reach out for a solution. Some people reach for Redux, some for MobX or whatever you're using. But I don't think that client state management is solved for now. We're still waiting for some like silver bullet solution that's going to solve both the client side and the server side with fetching data with GraphQL. Anyone else wants to add something? Yeah?
I just want to add using local state for a component is totally fine. Like a state management solution is good for maybe more complex state, as well as GraphQL is good for transportation layer. But still, if you have some kind of counter on your page, you don't need to add this counter to your state management solution, and you can just rely on local state is good enough. Yeah, just wanted to add that.
Question, yes.
Question more about new possibilities, new tools which we need. I'm thinking or asking that we have not new kind of application. It's like online collaboration tool like Wiki or Google Docs more, and how state management can help us to build this solution more easily than we can build it now, because it's like edge technology right now, because you need to synchronize state across many clients. You need to do it efficiently, easily, and you need to solve a conflict between different clients, because we still have a low connection, and we need to solve it somehow. And as I see people who start using this, building these online synchronization tools, they struggle a lot to build something reliable. They spend like a year to build something usable. Maybe you have comments and ideas how GraphQL, Mobix, or maybe next tool deal with that. I talking about Mobix state tree solution maybe can address that.
I guess I'll give this microphone to Michel then.
Yes, when it comes to synchronizing changes, and especially rebasing and handling conflicts, there are a couple of problems. One thing that doesn't help you is being able to time travel. I see that people often start with that, but it doesn't fit for multi-actor systems. So you need to be able to do either one of two things. The one is you need to be able to replay your actions so that you can distribute actions and then make sure that everybody replays them in a consistent order so that everybody ends up in the same state. I think that's the best solution in general. The second solution is to be able to generate and replay patches. That's kind of the generalized form of actions. So you're basically recording what mutations did happen, and then you're replaying those. That also works, and it's usually simpler to set up. For example, if you are either using Mobix State Tree or Immer or something like that, you can get the patches. The problem with patches is that conflict resolution is harder, because you cannot really determine what the user intended to do from patches, while you can still reason about what the user intended to do if you have a description of the actions that were emitted. And so, in any case, I recommend, if this is the core of your project, and it's really important to do it well, you need to make sure that you have an explicit piece of code in your application where actions are dispatched and are described in a serializable manner. And whether you use Redux for that or Mobix State Tree doesn't, in that sense, really matter. In the end, most of the complexity comes from the fact that how you handle a conflict isn't a problem that is solvable in an abstract way. Because what the meaning of a conflict is always depends on the meaning of your data for your application. So some conflicts, it's fine to just elect randomly a winner. For other conflicts, you want to make sure that no decision is being made automatically by the application and that the user has to redo things or loses his action. Answering that question depends on your problem domain. So you cannot get proper conflict handling standardized in a state management solution for that reason. But having replayable actions gets you a far way.
Adding to that answer, I can totally relate. And actually, I just been at the App.js conference, I think last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago. And there was a great talk by Eric Vicenti about his brand new cloud framework called Avon, which is for building web and mobile apps. And one of its features is essentially implementing this conflict resolution mechanism where you can think of it as a Redux on the server, where you essentially store your actions and then they are replayed on the server for the conflict resolution mechanism. So if you are looking for a solution to that problem or a candidate to that problem, then I would recommend you just looking at that tool and the talk maybe. And if not, the framework itself will be suitable for you. Maybe just the concepts or the ideas that he presented might work for you too. So that's kind of the use case for state management that I still see these days, such as Redux or MobX, as opposed to the component state being the conflict resolution and sort of sharing the state between different apps. And also, for example, if you want to store the native side of things in React Native, that's also useful for you to have.
So I want to add on GraphQL side. So on GraphQL, lots of things are kind of already solved if you use subscriptions and if you have reliable usage of subscriptions. But sometimes people overuse that. Sometimes people just use, for example, if they use Apollo client and they use a subscription component as a component of the render prop, they rely just on data getting back from the server and will be reloaded on the page. At some instances, when we have these conflicts, you will have a flash of content that you don't need, right? So there is a pattern of using subscription as sort of notificator, and instead of rendering something on the page, whenever subscription gets back to the client, you basically update Apollo cache with the data that you have a control of. So that really connects to what you said, like by replaying things on the client, you can totally connect that to things that you said and use the subscription as method of notifying the client something has changed, and then you have the ability to do whatever you want.
So I was actually interested in this problem, so I was poking in the network tools for Todoist, for Notion, for Google Calendar, just to see what they're doing. And basically, I think every one of these big companies have built their own sort of caching client-server mechanism for synchronizing the changes. So I don't think they're using GraphQL subscriptions. GraphQL subscriptions are a step towards the solution, but I think it's still not a silver bullet solution for this problem. So if you look at Google Calendar, Todoist, and Notion, when I tried Notion for the first time, I'm like, what the hell is going on? Probably the client state management is so complex that this cannot be solved with simple GraphQL or Apollo cache or something. So you have super complex client state management in Notion, and every second or after every action, they're dispatching some sort of weird JSON object to the server. They're serializing, deserializing, and then doing something on the server. But it's still some custom mechanism, and I don't think it's available as a library that you can just plug in and just use whatever they're using. So you wanted to add something?
I would just add it. There is actually a library made by Andrey Okonetchnikov. I don't know if you heard of him. He made Logux, which is, so the whole idea of here is to operate not on a JSON, not on a snapshot, but on an operation log. So, so the tricky part of the operation log is you want to make the timestamps function between server and client in a reliable way. That is a hard problem, not so if you could solve that problem, we wouldn't have conflicts at all, because, we could ID every item in a log in the right way, but that's kind of unsolvable problem. So he tried to solve it in a way CRDT kind of paper, so look up for CRDT. I think that's the latest we got in the theory. It's sometimes, it works in 99% cases, he said. So check out Logux. It's like Redux, this operation log, so probably it might be a solution for you. I don't know, reach out to Andrey. He's really pushing it forward, so he might be a help for you. Yeah.
Just to add a small thing, just to demonstrate why the problem is not solvable in a generic way, even if we can fix the timing and the rebasing problem. The problem is there's semantic meaning to all your data. And to give a very simple example, suppose you have two users seeing the same variable x. And x, both of them see the value of x is 1. And behind it you put a button that increases the number by 1. Now both see 1 and both press the button simultaneously. Then the question is, what should the end result be that both users see? Should it be 2, because they both incremented from 1 to 2? Or should it be 3, because both incremented? And so the answer to that question depends on what the number means. So if the number means that how many people did visit this page or something, then the answer should be 3, because both users visited the page. But if the meaning of that number is how many attendees are allowed at the conference, then both of them intended to set it to 2, because they wanted 2 seats to be available or something. So the meaning of an increment doesn't depend on how you solve the conflict. It depends on what the action means from the main perspective. And that is the reason why the problem is not generically solvable, because You want to handle conflicts in a different way depending on the meaning of your data.
Great question. That sparked a good discussion.
This episode is brought to you by Linode, our cloud server of choice, and we're excited to share they've recently launched dedicated CPU instances. If you have build boxes, CI/CD, video encoding, machine learning, game servers, databases, data mining, or application servers that need to be full duty, 100% CPU all day, every day, then check out Linode's dedicated CPU instances. These instances are fully dedicated and shared with no one else, so there's no CPU steal or competing for these resources with other Linodes. Pricing is very competitive and starts out at $30 a month. Learn more and get started at linode.com/changelog. Again, linode.com/changelog. And by Manifold. Manifold is the easiest way for you to discover, buy, and manage the best developer services for your application, regardless of your cloud. Manifold is changing the way developers and cloud services work together. Easily find, integrate, and share the best cloud services. And what's interesting is as you assemble your stack, you can organize your services into projects, then create and invite team members to collaborate via role-based access controls. And I love their hacker-friendly sign-up experience too. For example, if you're on a Mac, you can install the Manifold CLI via Homebrew, then run Manifold sign up to get started. It's so easy. Learn more and discover the best cloud services for your projects at manifold.co. Again, manifold.co.
I have more questions, but I'm curious, before I do, anyone had a really good question come in via the Advice Lounge earlier that you think would be good to get more perspectives on?
Well, I had a really interesting question regarding N+1 problem in GraphQL and how it's solved. So I am working at Hasura as a developer advocate, and some people ask me about like how it's solved and what are the challenges with N+1 problem. So basically the idea is, like Facebook uses data loader, some solutions use different solutions too. The idea is for every type you have a resolver that will fetch the data, so you'll get the N+1 SQL statements if you're connected to a database. So the question was how we solve it, and in Hasura, so we basically and basically it's a kind of a generic solution that you can use not only by using Hasura engine, but implementing your own thing. If you manage to compile your resolvers to some kind of one SQL statement, that you will solve this problem.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you, like, how many sessions you already had, because I just arrived like 1 hour ago. And I only had one, so so the question was, like, how many of you are writing React Native here? Okay, and the rest I assume is doing React, right? Or okay, and are you interested in writing React Native or not at all? Okay, so the question you might find useful was how can I get started with React Native and whether that requires a lot of native knowledge. And so basically the answer was that you can try with Expo if you don't want to write native code. But you know, the second answer to that question was that the native knowledge you need in order to write React Native is not really that scary. It's all about knowing how the project looks like and how you can start it. Problems will be when you want to release it, but trust me, when you get to the release step, you will be a great native developer. So don't get scared about that at the beginning, you know.
All right, yeah, question from the audience.
Hi, my name is Isham, software developer. I'm a .NET developer, and I am very familiar with Xamarin when I develop native apps. What is now the main advantage when I move to React Native? And I have good React skills also.
Well, so that's a good question. I'll try to answer as best as I can, though I never used Xamarin. I only have conceptual knowledge about that. But there is a great friend of mine that I promised I'm going to reach out to. His name is Ram, and he had Talk in the Morning. And speaking from his past employer, I think he knows a bit of Xamarin, so he might tell you a bit more about that. But the way I think about it is, you know, for me, the biggest deal of React Native compared to Xamarin or Flutter, because probably a lot of people are thinking about like Flutter too, is that React Native is using platform controls. So when I'm building a React Native app, what happens is I'm actually using the native platform controls and the native gestures and everything that comes with the platform. I'm just embracing. And I'm also using JavaScript, which is pretty cool language for me in the native world, because it's very expressive and allows me to write things fast, like parsing JSON data structures. Like, this has been always my nightmare in Objective-C. So I can imagine that in .NET it's also kind of less, let's say, scripty, that in JavaScript you just can't call probably JSON parse and randomly access on typed object. That's the advantage, let's say, we have. So for me that's it, and like these two are probably the biggest advantages for me. There might be others from the performance perspective that somebody else might want to cover too.
Yeah, so I might be wrong, but like what I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Xamarin does have the same robust solution for GraphQL that React Native has, as well as Flutter. And GraphQL is changing a lot in mobile ecosystem because, and it came from the need to do less requests to the server to get like on the lower end devices to get the traffic faster and to get all the data that we need. And I don't see it available in Xamarin nor Flutter, and this is one of the additional like pros towards React Native.
I think that's very, very right point. Back in the day, I've been looking into Elixir and plenty of other crazy technologies because I felt like if you are a software developer, you got to learn something more than just JavaScript. And the problem for me was that as soon as I wanted to use like GraphQL and other technologies that are sort of to-go choices in JavaScript, I've discovered that the libraries in those ecosystems were not really up to date, and they were just catching up. So it was one of the things that sort of put me off, and where I was like, I'm just gonna stick to JavaScript for production because surprisingly, you get support for these libraries, usually from the authors of the technology itself. So that's pretty cool.
I think also one last thing to mention is like the knowledge is very transferable. If you already have like a web app and if you have a team working with React, you can easily transfer them to like work on React Native and even like share components and share I've seen like apps who have like, I don't know, was it some GitHub client had like 80% of code reusability between web and 2 native clients for Android and iOS. So I think you can also share a lot of things, and if you already have a knowledge of, I know React and I know GraphQL with Apollo, you can just transfer it easily to React Native. So you have the advantage of having access to this entire ecosystem who's constantly, I think it's evolving more than the other, I don't want to bash on the other ones, but a lot of innovation is happening right now in this one, so that's also a big advantage. I'm not a native developer, but I can sit down and in a week, I gave a React Native workshop at a company for a week. And I wasn't a React Native developer. I just sat down, looked at the docs, and I'm like, okay, this is just React, but for native. So that's a big advantage. Yeah.
That sounds like a topic for your next vlog, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the thing, React Native long-term goal is to be, less native. When I had a chat with the React and React Native team back at the React Conf, the general feeling was that we should stop speaking of React Native as a separate thing, because React Native essentially could be just React, but rendered on different platforms, and so there is no reason for differentiating these. And the long-term goal we have with React Native, I believe, is to decrease the amount of native knowledge you need to know, and that's also what we are trying to accomplish with the CLI and the tools that we build around React Native to make your experience working with dependencies and native code as smooth as possible. So. We are still somewhere in the middle of our road, but we know where we headed, so this should be improving with every month.
So it's unrelated to the technology choice, but more on architectural level. I think this blurring the line between native and non-native is it's really important to keep in mind the architectural choices and the things I talked today about primitives. I think it's even more important to think about UI elements as a primitives and not going to use HTML primitive, for example, if it's web, trying to put them in abstracted primitives Because by doing so early, you could save a lot of time when you start thinking about, okay, now I want to build a native app using same buttons, inputs, and etc. Right? Because you can abstract the rendering target completely. So yeah, I think it's important to keep this in mind, that architecting the app, the whole user interface.
All right, we are getting close to the end. We probably have time for one more question. So we have a question coming in from the audience.
Check. Yeah. A question regarding React Native. So recently we've seen some articles that some companies are leaving React Native and then want to write their application with React Native. So the question, what do you think? Is it still around? Is it still reasonable to start a new application with React Native, or better to, hire a command like with real native guys who will write the real native application for iOS, Android? What do you think?
So I have a great example. I can't really. I have a great example how React Native can be better than native apps. Like I personally built with a few of my friends at my company. We built a media player for singers. And fun fact is that the company came to us having already built mobile app by one of the best agencies in Europe, and they were struggling with the performance. And we were able to outperform performance of the native app with React Native 2 years ago without all the great things that we have right now. So it is totally doable. And actually the reason their approach was slow was that it was all imperative. So the declarative nature of React Native sort of won. Regarding your question about companies leaving, it's always gonna happen because, it's like React Native itself is not a silver bullet, and it's getting great adoption at different businesses, and they are trying React Native to see whether it fits their business goals and architecture. And so one of the approaches, like with React Native, there's the brownfield approach where you integrate React Native into existing infrastructure, and the greenfield one when you start from scratch. And so it always can happen that when you start integrating React Native into native app, it will not work for you. And like for Airbnb, it didn't work out in the long term because of the trade-offs were not worth for them. And I think the article was pretty explicit about that. But there are hundreds of companies using React Native and actually thousands of apps in the App Store. I'm not sure if I can disclose the number and how it was mined, but there is a lot of React Native applications out there, and they are in a pretty good shape. And last year when we were talking about React Native, there were a lot of people like asking me and other contributors, like, how's React Native looking like? Whether it's gonna be the thing or it's gonna sort of vanish. And the general sort of feeling inside the community was that, like we could do better, and it's like everybody was slowly getting out of ideas. But things dramatically improved since then, and over like last year, things changed from being, not so good to being amazing. We have a lot of great development going on, such as, the new re-architecture that will allow great things to happen, especially for the native developers. So a lot of these advantages that these companies are talking about right now will be totally gone in a matter of a few months. So I'd say there is a really, really bright future ahead in front of React Native. And I'm saying that after exploring Flutter and other technologies for mobile alternatives. I'm still thinking that React Native is going to be, like, it's the best technology right now on the market for that particular cross-platform solution. And like, I've checked the others, and like, speaking of trade-offs, I think it's just the best one, unless you don't need a cross-platform app. Then, like, if you're building a game, then, like, probably just build native app, and that's not the failure of React Native. It's just, like, for that particular app, you just need native code.
I know you work with React Native a lot. Like, I mean, that's basically your job. But what I want to mention, and what you're forgetting, is Facebook this year is forming the Avengers Initiative for fixing React Native. So they're hiring like they're forming this team who's sitting down and properly like addressing all the problems that React Native has. So when I saw that GitHub issue about, hey community, what kind of problems do you have? Here's like 1,000 problems that we have. Here's how we're going to address them. So I think now they're going to double down on fixing and making it stable. And I think it's just going to they're just getting started with React Native, and more companies are going to adopt it because now it's finally, they're properly sitting down and forming like putting more effort and more engineering effort into actually working on React Native. So I think it's just getting started.
I know that we are running out of time, but I just want to mention a couple of things quick. So, Kitze, that's a very important thing you said. I just got too much technically, into that matter. Like last year, the React Native team was sort of getting smaller. There were a lot of people leaving, and this year, like it's growing super quick. So many great developers joining. The team is just getting bigger, and you can see that by the contributions that happen. We had the London Trash between Facebook and contributors from the community. That was the first hackathon ever we got together, and there is already one planned to happen later this year. So the collaboration between Facebook and community is getting better, and that's the most important thing, because historically, that was the thing that wasn't that good, and now it's improving. So the more we keep being synced with Facebook, and the more we work together on fixing issues and improving the framework towards the direction we all want to use it, then it's gonna be good. So there is this React Native community organization on GitHub. Check it out. There is a lot of information about what's happening in React Native, where we are headed. If you want to help, that's the place to check out, and all the information you probably wanted to ask, but we don't have time. You can see there. Thank you.
So we do have to wrap up. It is now lunchtime, but let's get a hand for this panel, huh? And if you like listening to brilliant minds like this, and you like picking their brains, we can't go to a conference every week, but the podcast publishes every week, and we do a live episode. We stream it live. You can pick the panelists' brains using Slack rather than in person, but here in Europe, I guess it would be in the evenings. It goes live on Thursdays, 1 Eastern US, which I think is, what is that, 10 o'clock here, 9 o'clock? I don't know. Evenings here, but so you can go to changelog.com/JSparty. You can check it out. We're available in all of your podcast applications, whatever you might like, and you can get this level of thought and energy and excitement every week. So thank you so much.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you for tuning in to JS Party this week. Tune in live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. US Eastern at changelog.com/live. Join the community and Slack with us in real time during the shows. Head to changelog.com/community. And do us a favor, share this show with a friend. Rate us on Apple Podcast. Go into Overcast and favorite it. And thank you to Fastly, our bandwidth partner. Head to fastly.com to learn more. And we move fast and fix things around here at Changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. We're hosted on Linode Cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. Check them out and support this show. Our music is produced by Breakmaster Cylinder. And you can find more shows just like this at changelog.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Winner, winner, chicken dinner, you have won again. Yes, that's why you listen all the way to the end of the shows, because we give you previews of what's coming up. And as you may have guessed, we have another preview of our upcoming show called Brain Science. This podcast is for the curious. It explores the inner workings of the human brain to understand behavior change, habit formation, mental health, and the human condition. This show is hosted by myself, Adam Stakoviak, and my good friend Muriel Reese, a doctor in clinical psychology. It's brain science applied, not just how does the brain work, but how do we apply what we know about the brain to better our lives. Here we go. My wife and I, we've learned this concept of goodwill, right?
Yeah.
I can take your feedback or your criticisms in a different light if I know that you have goodwill for me.
Yep.
Meaning that you're not trying to harm me, that you are for me, not against me. And sometimes change, as we all know, is painful and can be painful. So sometimes the necessary feedback and or criticism that can influence that change can also be painful. But I can accept it differently if I know that she or they or whomever is in the scenario with me has goodwill for me, whereas if you know that they're not for you, then you obviously take it a whole different way. And that's an okay thing. But we often are, in relationship with people that are giving us crucial feedback, and we need to have that kind of that lens. Like, it was significant in our marriage to understand, hey, I know there are times when you give me feedback, I am not happy about it, but I know you have goodwill for me. So therefore I calm down, I listen, I take that in and I process it, whatever, but I take it in a different way because I know that she's for me and not against me.
Yep. One of the key things when it comes to change is a sense of openness, and even relationally, like of going, I need to be able to see how somebody else responds or how they're feeling as based on their perspective of what they're going through and not just my perspective of their perspective. And so this goodwill is like, I believe that we're on the same side and that you're not trying to make it harder for me. But so I can understand if I were sitting where you were sitting, had the background that you had, why you would have taken it in that way. And then I can provide an opportunity to clarify or create more connection, even when it doesn't feel good. And I honestly think this is so much of what's missing in people's relationships. If I look at relational interactions through the notion of conditioning, wherein I get a sort of hit of dopamine, feel good feelings because I went to a person, I had a conversation that didn't necessarily feel good, but there was openness on both parties to hear one another's perspective, that it actually then reinforces like, oh, when I go and I have this exchange with people, I feel better. So now I'm going to go and engage with other people and get the feedback, even if I might not like the feedback, because now I'm buffered and I'm not alone in this and somebody else sees my world.
That's a preview of Brain Science. If you love where we're going with this, send us an email to get on the list to be notified the very moment this show gets released. Email us at editors@changelog.com. In the subject line, put in all caps, Brain Science with a couple bangs if you're really excited. You can also subscribe to our master feed to get all of our shows in one single feed. Head to changelog.com/master or search in your podcast app for Changelog Master. You'll find it. Subscribe, get all of our shows, and even those that only hit the master feed. Again, changelog.com/master.